Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tracing the incredible journey of special education, a story all about shifting ideas, some truly pioneering individuals, and a powerful fight for fundamental rights. So, to really understand where we are right now with laws that actually guarantee a place in school for every single child, we have to look back. We've got to ask, what caused that huge radical shift in thinking that literally changed everything? Okay, let's dive right in. We're going to explore this whole evolution in 5 distinct eras. We'll start with the earliest sparks of a new idea, then move to the creation of the very first schools, see how a professional system was formed, cover the critical fight for civil rights, and finally get to the landmark laws that protect students today. So, our story really begins way back in the 18th century. Before this time, if you had a disability, you were often seen as cursed, maybe even possessed. But a whole new era of thinking, the Enlightenment, was about to completely transform that perspective. This right here represents a monumental shift in thinking. Society was finally moving away from seeing disability as some kind of moral or spiritual failing, and instead embracing a revolutionary new idea that learning is individual and everyone proceeds at their own pace. This powerful concept, which the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau really laid out in his book Émile, was the philosophical seed, you could say. It suggested that education should adapt to the child, not the other way around. And this simple idea, it set the stage for the very first pioneers in special education. So, you have this new philosophy, but how is it actually put into action? Well, a handful of really determined individuals took up the call and they built the very first institutions dedicated to educating children with disabilities. You can really see the momentum building here. It started over in France with schools for the deaf and the blind, but the movement soon crossed the Atlantic. And in the early 1800s, pioneers like Thomas Gallaudet and Samuel Gridley Howe established the first specialized schools in the United States, proving that education for all was actually possible. And the success of these early schools just sparked a wave of growth. States all across the country began opening their own residential institutions. Now, it's really important to note the language used in the names of these schools because it reflects the terminology of the time. And while these terms are obviously offensive today, they mark a period where society began creating dedicated spaces for education, even if the approach and understanding were still just getting started. These individual efforts were fantastic, no doubt, but for real lasting change, a structured system was needed. So the late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the professionalization of special education. So 3 really crucial steps laid this new groundwork. First, the National Education Association officially recognized the field. Then, universities began training teachers specifically for these roles. And finally, the founding of the Council for Exceptional Children created a powerful organization to advocate for both students and educators. At the exact same time, new scientific tools were starting to emerge. The adaptation of the IQ test provided for the very first time a standardized way to identify children who might need specialized services. But this tool wasn't without its controversy. Its use sometimes led to mislabeling and segregation rather than support, and that's a debate that honestly continues to this day. Okay, now we leap forward to the mid-20th century, and here the conversation completely shifts from, can we educate these children, to, don't they have a right to be educated? The fight for special education becomes totally inseparable from the broader civil rights movement. And guess who became the most powerful force for change? Parents. Using the language of that era, they founded groups like the National Association for Retarded Children. These families began organizing, advocating, and just demanding that their children not be ignored by the public education system. And then came the legal earthquake. The Supreme Court's ruling in Brown v. Board of Education, which declared racial segregation in schools unconstitutional, it provided the exact legal argument that advocates for disability rights needed. I mean, if separate was unequal for race, why wasn't it unequal for disability? So, armed with this incredibly powerful precedent, advocates took to the courts. 2 huge landmark cases in the early 70s, Park in Pennsylvania and Mills in D.C., successfully argued that excluding children with disabilities from public schools was a violation of their constitutional rights. These victories, well, they opened the floodgates. And what a flood it was. I mean, after these 2 major victories, it was like a legal snowball effect. 36 more lawsuits were filed across the country, all fighting for the same fundamental rights to education for children with disabilities. The message to lawmakers was becoming absolutely impossible to ignore. So this overwhelming legal and social momentum finally pushed Congress to act, to take decades of advocacy and court rulings and changing attitudes and just combine them all into one comprehensive, revolutionary federal law. This was the game changer. Public Law 94-142, passed in 1975, established four non-negotiable rights that form the very bedrock of special education today. The right to a free and appropriate education, in the least restrictive environment possible, with a personalized plan, the IEP, and the right for families to challenge decisions. But the law didn't just stop there. It evolved. In 1990, it was renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and it's been revised since then. And in that same year, the Americans with Disabilities Act extended protections beyond just the classroom to all areas of public life. So this whole journey took us from the shadows of superstition all the way to the legal mandate for inclusion. The fight secured a place in the schoolhouse for every single child. But the question for our time is still out there. Now that the door is open, what's the next frontier in making sure every student doesn't just attend, but truly, truly thrives?